We'll go ahead and get started. As people pop on, feel free to use the chat if you have any difficulties, or if your picture goes out, I'll be moderating the chat on the side. But you can go ahead and mute yourselves as we get going. And you're always welcome to stop your video if you'd like as we go through the program. So first of all, good morning and welcome to everyone. This is the Center for Spiritual Living, Sarasota. And we are very happy to see your beautiful faces. So thank you for coming on this wonderful morning and choosing to share time with us. If you have been joining us along in our series, is the final one in our series, which is called Healthy Mind plus a Healthy Body equals a Healthy Life. And if you would like to see the previous two, you can go visit us on our website at cslsarasota.com. And there, the videos are in our archives. Today's workshop is going to be titled Getting Unstuck, The Keys to Unlocking Your True Potential by Ron Frost, who you can see is joining us here in our gallery. And throughout this event, we're actually going to do true to workshop form. And Ron will actually open up the floor for comments as part of the exercises. So we encourage you to participate if you'd like to join in. So at this time, just a reminder for housekeeping that you mute your microphone, and you're more than welcome to hide your video if you have anything going on in the background. And if you don't like the gallery view, or you just want to see Ron, up in the top right of your window, you can click the view button and switch to speaker view. And then that way you will only see Ron and the slides. Otherwise, you'll see all of us in gallery view. So if you have a notepad and a pen, I highly recommend you bring it out. There's going to be lots of good stuff to take notes on. And if you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the chat. Otherwise, welcome everyone, and now we'll begin.
All right, thank you, Tina. Well, great to have everybody here this morning. Is everybody feeling excited? Absolutely great. Well, I appreciate you being here, and as part of this three-part series, healthy mind, healthy body, healthy life. The fact is we know from the principles that we've already been through, that we understand that there's certain things that we can apply on a regular basis that can help us be more in aligned, more in a state of joy, more in a state of happiness and gratitude, and from that actually be an experience of having a life that's more fulfilling. And so this morning, I'm going to go through some of the basic principles. I mean, just in an hour, it's hard for me to go through everything, but I'm going to go through some of the basic principles of some of the things that I've been teaching. Now, how many of you have had a moment in your life where raise your hand if you've had that one moment where you're like, somehow I had this feeling that something greater is going on, even though I don't understand it. Have you ever had that happen? Right? Maybe it was when you were a child, or maybe it was, some just weird experience. Maybe you just kind of felt that, that helping hand of the divine that showed up. Maybe it was a synchronicity. Have you ever had that time where you are thinking of somebody and you're going to pick up the phone, you're going to call them, but the moment you do that, suddenly their name shows up on your caller ID. They're calling you, right? So we know that even though we're in this life, and a lot of people talk about what's called the physical birth of going through the state of amnesia, being lost so we can be found, and having that discovery along the way. And it comes from this urge, this thing that's always seeking within us, always trying to explore and realize the greatness that we are. Because in life, fundamentally, the way our culture is, the way our world is, nobody's to blame. We can't blame one religion over another religion or a belief system. But fundamentally, we've been groomed or taught or brought up in a culture where we're told basically two things that set the stage of life. And not everybody, of course, a lot of you are awakened and enlightened, so further along the path, but if you think about humanity in general, the two things are the source of creation, or the divine source of creation, is outside of us. We're told that. That outside or separateness puts us in a disempowered state. And the other one is separation. Separation comes from duality. And we're brought up in this drama or this thought process that there is a God and a devil, right? That there's two opposing forces. And the way I've always rationalized that is really there's only one thing. So whatever way it's expressed, whether it's expressed as good or evil, light or dark, yin or yang, whatever way it's expressed, left or right, it can have multiple expressions, but it's still one thing. And if we were to create a devil, it'd be created on the same God stuff that everything else is created. So pretty much those principles that set the stage of the illusion of disempowerment from being separate in duality, if you look at science of mind or affirmative prayer, the first two steps, that really says it all. Because realization and unification. So hopefully everybody's been somewhat acclimated to science of mind. I know some of you may have come from different backgrounds, and some of you may have visited a Center for Spiritual Living. Are you all from a Center for Spiritual Living? In different places? Okay, good, excellent. All right, speaking to the right audience. But if we look at, okay, where is the problem? You go from problem to solution. Well, the problem basically is we've been set up to understand the world a certain way, and somehow in our awakening process, we start to anchor in another truth, which really comes from the first two steps of science of mind prayer, affirmative prayer, which God is all there is, and I am one with that source. That is an empowerment, where before that is disempowerment. So I feel that, the genius that Ernest Holmes was, and the discovery of a process of God is all there is, and I am one with that divine source that creates in and through me. I'm now empowered. That's a huge shift. And as difference makers in the world, light workers and people that actually practice this, we actually shift the human collective, because we're not so much just an individualized being as we are part of the connection or a puzzle piece within the divine matrix of humanity, the divine matrix of the universe. So everything that we practice and we anchor within ourselves, that we transform within ourselves, is actually shifting the entire world. So with that, I came across the Center for Spiritual Living and this teaching, but it was something like I already knew. True, most of us are, it's an awakening of something when we hear spiritual truth, it's something we already know. And I started to apply this in the various aspects of my life. Now, the book Getting Unstuck that I wrote and the principles behind that may be a little bit more towards what we might say business, because I do a lot of business coaching. I do a lot of sales coaching. But even the thought process, of being an empowered believer is used in everything. I mean, I used it in sports, and I've used it with athletes. I've used it with people who have had a project that want to write a book. Or maybe they do want to start a business. Or maybe they're coming more from the creative background. Like Fani, my wife, who's a singer, right? So this works regardless. And it really allows us to, again, walk that more empowered life. Because as we live our greatness, we're doing good not only for ourselves, but we're doing good for all of humanity. So with that, what I realized were there four things that I kind of, as I started studying life, right, and studying, who was happy and successful, and it wasn't always about money, right? We're somehow conditioned to believe it's about material things and money, but it was the people that were fulfilled, happy, joyful, expressing this feeling of gratitude and positivity in their life, out there making a difference. And they were fully unleashed into their greatness, or at least on the process of on their way of greatness. And it was basically these four things seemed to come into play somewhere in their life, because life leaves clues. So as we start to study things, whether it's within our own life or in other people's lives, and we see these things working, we start to then backwards engineer it, and I can start to apply that into our own lives and sharing it with others. And that's basically what I did. So the four basic principles, if you want to write these down, is number one, a positive mindset. A positive mindset is sometimes difficult, to achieve or maintain. But the positive mindset makes us believe it is possible, even if we don't know it how. The positive mindset gives us that feeling that things are going to work out, even during our darkest times. So number one is positive mindset. The second area is being aligned with what we would call our purpose and not lost in anybody else's definition of our purpose, right? There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of people that are like, I don't know what my purpose is. Even if your purpose is just to have fun, right? Fun in life, that's a purpose. You define your purpose, basically. I don't know if anybody ever, listens to channeling at all, and that's kind of a different subject, but, in many ways we're channeling our higher selves. So there was one particular channel that I listened to by the name of Bashar, and everybody sits in a room and they wait for this voice to come through this individual, and this profound wisdom. They're waiting, and suddenly he shares his words, and the words he shared at this moment was, "There is no meaning to life, except for the meaning you give it." And I sat there and I said, "Oh." If he ended halfway through that sentence, I would have been depressed. There is no meaning to life with the exception of the meaning that you give it, because you're the divine creator of your own reality. And so with the positive mindset, the mindset of belief, and the alignment with purpose, and again, purpose is what you give it. We all have tendencies. And we're going to get into that a little bit. We're going to get into the magic that's already working through us. What is our own uniqueness, right? And then honing in on that, which is the flow and the joy, because we're in that state of our purpose. We're actually feeling better and more alive. The next one. So you got mindset, positive mindset, purpose or passion, purpose and passion. And then you've got what's called inspired action. See, people that were successful were always taking action. They were always deciding. They were always moving forward, even if it was a little thing. People that weren't were stagnant. And almost I felt like action equaled happiness if it was coming out of an inspired action. So inspired or in spirit, we think about that, when we come from that positive belief aligned with the things that we feel good about, that the areas that blossom our soul, where we can serve, and we take action, and it's inspired action, not action out of fear. And today, the human collective, if you look around, a lot of them are taking action out of more of something that's outside of themselves, something that's fear-based. And I've practiced for a long time of actually turning off devices, turning off TV, getting out into nature and breathing. And the moment I started to do that, I realized my intuition started to wake up. So the divine source that's within us is awakened the moment we start to shut down the rhetoric or the information channel, the thing that's going on outside of us. And especially if the emotion that we're feeling is the emotion out of fear, from whatever source it may be. And I'm not blaming this source or that source and saying this is better than that. I'm just saying for us to be mindful. Jim Rohn says, to be mindful that, be at the gateway of our mind, right? And being able to be aware of what's coming in and making a decision. Is this working for me? Is this is this healthy for me and for my life? So with that, as we actually take what we would call inspired action, and it can be small steps, right? The last thing is what I call non-resistance. It's just basically surrendering. It's kind of like the last step of the prayer. I give it up and so it is, right? I surrender and so it is. And if we practice that in our life, even at those times when we're just absolutely stuck, that's why I wrote the book, Getting Unstuck. Realizing that the divine source is always working through us, is always going to figure it out. There's always something greater than even our small mind can understand. To surrender, even in a moment of a dark night of a soul, right? To surrender and let go is quite often where we experience awakening and we're brought to a higher level. And so those four things, positive mindset, being on purpose, and being able to take inspired action, and being able to just surrender and let go and trust, those are the things that I started applying. And again, like I said, do I work in the business world? Yes, but you know what? We're all CEOs of our own life destiny. So in a way, we're all in a business world. We're all the champion of our own outcome of what we want to achieve and what we want to do, how we want to share, and how we want to give. So it comes down to just understanding how these principles work, which I know all of you do. So coming from that first one, what I found was most people had two things going on. The positive mindset, the reason why they weren't feeling good about themselves was they had low self-esteem or low self-image, or not feeling worthy or not feeling good enough. And then the second one was their concept of the world and not recognizing an infinite supply, and so therefore being in a state of fear or worry or doubt, more because they were always in survival mode. And so how do we shift that? So, there's many ways that we can shift it. We know everything is energy. We can shift it absolutely with affirmational prayer. We can shift it by meditation, just letting go, relaxing. We can shift it by practicing gratitude, for the things that are always in our life. I've always loved, and I always love to play around with just simple affirmations. And in my book, I go through this. I go, what is it that we're feeling? If we were to express it in words, and not only in words, but also in feeling, what is it that we're feeling? What do we think it is? All right, now let's look at that and say the opposite of it. And it's really just as simple. If I was to write down the thing that's going on that I feel is the pattern of my life, and maybe I brought it from childhood, maybe it's just something I've just suddenly become aware of and it's holding me back. Well, what would be the opposite, or what I would want to call the truth? The new thought. Remember, we're a new thought religion. New thought. So basically, what I found are two things, again, from low self-esteem or not feeling worthy, as well as, I'm not aware of the abundance that's all around me, the infinite good that's going to support my greater good and move through me in my life. Well, the two things were simple affirmations. And one is, everything is okay. Everything is always working out for me is like my favorite affirmation. So even when I don't think about it, it just comes out of my mouth. I am perfect, whole, and complete. Now think about that. Why do we say I am perfect, whole, and complete? Because it comes from the opposite of what we tend to find within the race consciousness, even if it's not in our consciousness. A sense of not being worthy. So even when we anchor it, we're saying, I already know this. These are simple words. But the more that we anchor this in, we shift our energy, we feel better about ourselves, but we're also shifting the entire humanity. I am perfect, whole, and complete. And then the second one is all my needs are met. Again, it's the flip side of that fear of there's not enough supply. What happens if I don't have this? It's that wild mind going off, and so that can consume us. Science says we have 40 to 60,000 thoughts per day, most of them not serving us, most of them are repetitive. But by having a practice of, and you could put that into an entire Science of Mind prayer. You can put that into entire treatment. Or you could just use those statements and mantras. And I like to use those when I'm exercising. I don't know how many of you go to the gym or lift weights. It's one of my favorite things. So if I'm on a treadmill and it's a pattern, I start to use these words. Of course, I don't always speak it out loud because there's other people on the treadmills next to me. But if I'm lifting weights or whatever it is, I start to use this because there's a cadence to it. It's very similar to what we see with music. There's a pattern, and after a while, it tends to be embedded within us, and we feel it. So those two things I found as I practice with people, I get them to do that because here's the thing. Anytime I've ever sat down, consulted, or coached anybody, and I was, initially going, tell me your dreams, your desires, and your goals. If they're not feeling worthy, if they're not coming from a positive mindset, they can't even articulate that. So the first thing is helping them shift their mindset. And those two affirmations, and I always tell people, play around, design your own, practice them, record them into a microphone and play them back to yourself. Sometimes I used to actually record affirmations in the I am and the you are. And because when I played it back to myself, I would hear it in the you are, like my voice telling me. So again, you can write them down, you can practice them, but I just found that those two tend to, for most people, tend to be the thing that shifts them. And then from there, well, what is our purpose, right? Where can we find purpose? And so as I start to, look at anybody's life, it's typically from the questions that you start to ask ourselves, because life leaves clues, and it's probably the magic that's already been happening around you the entire life and you just don't know. And it can be from, a childhood experience or an inner desire. You think about children, what do they like to do? They like to pretend, the pretending. Well, if we look at the words, tend or tendency, a tendency of a way of being, pre being before, all that is activity that is going on through pretending and seeding what your consciousness is wanting to blossom into the future. So when a child is left alone doing the activity of pretending, that's basically their consciousness at work. And of course, we parents sometimes get in there and start to change that a little bit. But we all need to be that child. We all need to come back to that pretending, that dreamlike state, and seeing what would that look like? How would that feel? So anything that you may have had from childhood, to go back to that's definitely a question that you kind of want to ask yourself. And so I'm going to share a slide, and these are several what I call self-discovery questions that we're going to go through. And let me just share my screen here. Take 2 seconds. Okay, so everybody can see my screen? All right. So those are the 4 things: positive mindset, aligned with purpose, inspired action, non-resistance. Positive mindset: I am perfect, whole, and complete. All my needs are met. Aligned with purpose. Okay, so before I get into the questions, I'm going to talk a little bit about a story and how this works. And I'm going to share somebody that's near and dear to my heart, and that's my wife, Fani. Okay? So when we got married, we met in Indonesia, and I actually was helping to run a business. She came in, applied for a job, and fell in love. We hired her for the job, but then, I married her and took her away from the company. Brought her back to the United States. And, the moment you come into another country, you're lost. Think about it. It's not your language. It's not your home. And then so not only being lost in purpose, but, you're lost in your place. And so this became a struggle. And so job after job after job. we just, it was just kept sitting down and saying, what is it that you really, really want to do? Again, if you're not feeling good about yourself, the first step, which is that positive mindset, you can't even articulate what you want to do. And that was kind of what she was coming from. She goes, I don't know. And so I just decided, well, let's start a business, because I had been in the sign and graphic business for quite some time. I'm like, let's start a business. And that's a little article in the news press. It's a little fuzzy, but basically that's Fonnie and me, and we're at a table making a sign, and somebody from the news press came in and they wrote up an article about us. And the business was thriving, and it was taking off, doing really, really well. But there was my wife, unhappy. It wasn't her business. It wasn't her thing. You think about the word sign and you think about the word sing, right? It's the same 4 letters. And it's just the G and the N that's reversed. And the fact was, things started happening as we started going to the Center for Spiritual Living. We started practicing different methods of consciousness, and I was so into this because it was so aligned to my work, as a life coach and things that I really wanted to help people with. And I said, why don't I first work, with the person that's closest to me? And so as we meditated and we started asking questions to the divine and things, we started doing affirmational prayer, things just started shifting. And there were several things that happened, and I don't want to get into all of it because it's a very long story, but we had a moment where my youngest daughter had signed up for vocal lessons, and she didn't want to go by herself. I bought 2 tickets, one for me, one for her. I absolutely don't like singing. I love to listen to it, but I don't like singing. But I'm like, I'm the dad, so I'm going to go. And something happened. I had to get a job done. We were making signs for it was called Red, White, and Boom. It's a big festival in Cape Coral, Florida for 4th of July. And it's like I had to scramble, and I could not go. And I called Fonnie and I said, can you show up? Just be there. Just sit in the corner. She just won't do this vocal lesson thing. And, and the funny thing was when Fonnie got there, they wanted her on stage. They pushed her. They heard her voice. And this was the first breakthrough that happened. The second one was she was going to a chiropractor consistently because of back issues. And this was going on and on and on. And we actually started trading signs for the chiropractor until he said, I don't need any more signs, but your wife is definitely needing help. So like every other day she was going to the chiropractor. And we had a dear friend, and she had practiced Reiki, and she kind of said, I really would love to, do some Reiki on your wife. And so my wife was laid down on a table, and her name was Kathleen, and she put her hands over her, and she looked at me and she said, I got a message. And I said, what do you mean we got a message? She goes, I got a message. Your wife needs to sing. This back problem is not going to fix itself until she expresses her creativity. And and she goes, what comes to me is singing. And I'm like, amazing, you can figure that out from, so long story short, we went to another workshop, and, the same thing kind of happened at that workshop, this magical moment, and like people were encouraging her to work on her dream. And so at that moment, things started really taking off. The moment she took inspired action, right? That step of inspired action. That inspired action is, what is the one thing I can do today that will move me in the direction of my dreams? That's all. And she got on stage, of course, first at Center for Spiritual Living in Naples, then at Center for Spiritual Living Cape Coral. Then it got outside of the Center for Spiritual Living. Somebody showed up and said, hey, there's a bar downtown and I sing, could you accompany me? And then it became a website, business cards, producing, a CD, a demo CD that we could hand out. And one by one, we started getting all these gigs. There were weddings, there were events, there were restaurants, and of course, the favorites are the Center for Spiritual Livings and the Unities, because it's a whole different genre and a feeling of appreciation when you're singing in front of a group like that. So anyways, that's really, really what shifted it. So the big question is, what is it for you? What clues are in your life? And we tend to get so busy and wrapped up in life that we never ask these simple questions. And these questions are, what are your natural gifts and talents? Sometimes we just like, well, I know them, but I don't think about them. But those are seeds. Those are little packets of information that give you an idea. Or what is your biggest challenge, or maybe still is? Because a lot of us that are healers, sometimes we go through something ourselves. Every healer that is walking this planet really is a person that has something that awakened within them. They go, I want to solve it for me first, and as soon as I figure it out for me, I want to go out there and teach others. Okay? So what is your struggle? Because quite often that's a divine thing that's helping you to realize your greatness. If time and money were unlimited, again, that's taking off the restrictions. That's taking away the fear that, if time and money were unlimited, what would you do? And again, it doesn't have to be career-based. Everybody always goes, well, I can't make money at that, right? Do you? I do that a lot too. But it can be creativity. It could be gardening. Now recently we bought a house, now we're into gardening and planting, and it's so much fun. And people will say, well, that's your purpose? Well, it's aligned with the things I love to do. And so therefore, just like Bashar said, there is no purpose to life except for the purpose that you give it. And so this is where you choose whatever it is that brings you joy and brings you happiness. So go back and reflect, what is the most fun or joyful, proud moment? What was that? And why? The bigger question is why? Why did you feel that way? What do others come to you for advice or for your skill or for some sort of natural talent that you have? What do they rely on you for? What is that area of service that you just enjoy sharing with others? And if you were to teach the world, right? If you're to teach the world one thing, what would that be? So these questions, if you take the time, and I know we're going through this in an hour, and normally I get people sharing, because that's in a workshop, typically that's what we do. But if you take these questions and you think about them and you contemplate them, even if you don't have the answers right at this moment, go sit at the beach, and sit down with your journal and reflect on these questions. And quite often you're going to find the clues. It's funny because if I go back to Fani as the example, and I'm going to unshare it for a second here, and we'll come back to that. Quite often people are going to say, well, what about like these other things out there, like astrology? Okay. If I go back to Fani as an example, you look at her astrology or numerology or anything else, it's like, oh, it says the exact same thing. It says that she's creative. It says that she should be expressing that way. And so if we were to take the concept that there's only one thing, that thing is divine, infinite intelligence, is Esme, and everything else is too, then all these things that we call systems or devices or tools has to be divine intelligence also. We can't put it outside of that, right? So if we look at it that way, say, but I am not my little me, I am the divine higher source, the one source that flows through me, that perhaps I created all this all along the way, and these are just the breadcrumbs of life that are clues that I'm now picking up and looking at and giving me little things to awaken from. And I always say, when we look at anything, we can look at it through the eyes of it's serving my greater good, or we can look at it in a fear-based way. There's always two ways to look at things. So regardless of whether it's astrology or whatever, if you use it as guidance of your good and blossoming to your greater good, as opposed to some fearful thing of, oh, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't be that. We can always fall into that trap too. But that's because we are the perceiver. We are the perceiver. Albert Einstein says there's basically two ways to look at the universe. Everything is, good. Everything is good, or everything is, not serving us. So it's either, we're seeing that it's a friendly universe or a universe that is unfriendly. And that's our choice. We can look at it one way or the other. Well, part of that shift is understanding. So when you start to look at those questions, and there's probably other questions that you could come up with too, but those are some of the most basic ones, and we rarely contemplate on those. As we start to discover the things that hey, maybe I haven't been doing this, and I would feel better about doing this, right? Maybe it's reading a book, taking a class. There's wonderful classes, obviously, that are being held here. Kathleen Frankart's got another class that's coming up. So whatever it is, that little push inside of us is that inspired action. Taking that step. Maybe it's an art class. Tina was on earlier, and we were talking about art. And I'm by no means an artist, but I want to show you something. This was a painting that I did, and again, it's my wife, of course, one of my favorite subjects to paint. But what is art? Well, art is a creative expression. A lot of times we say, well, I can't do that. I'm not an artist. I used to say that. I used to say the exact same thing. I don't have that natural talent. And then one time I was, watching another artist paint, and I saw, I just like, wow, that's amazing. And I kind of said, I wish I could do that. And he said, you can. And so I walked away from that thinking like, well, it starts with belief. It starts with belief that I can, and then takes action. And this was actually years ago. I think it was one of our anniversaries. I think it was our 10-year anniversary or whatever. And she was actually singing at one of her gigs. I ran out to Michael's, got the canvas, got the paint, got a bottle of wine, and then it's proceeded for the remaining 2 hours before she came home to quickly throw this thing together. And I even surprised myself. So again, what is purpose? Purpose is what we call it, right? We can recognize the gifts and talents that we have, or even if we choose to have, and then take an inspired action. We can't fail. We can only fail if we don't move, if we don't take any action at all. If we stay within the mindset of I can't do. All right. So that activity, I think, of self-discovery does help to help us kind of realize the things that will move us along the way. So I'm going to go and I'm going to share my slides again. Okay, so inspired action. This slide right here is actually in the wrong place. And I'll get to that too, because gratitude is fundamentally the one thing I believe that helps seal this all. But if we're to take this that's in front of us, what is the one thing I would like to do? This is my dyslexia coming through. What is the one thing I would like to do instead of would I like to do? I guess you could read it both ways. What is the one thing I would like to do or accomplish for the next 12 months? And that could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. You determine the time, right? So take this moment now and think about one thing. If you can write it down in your journal or paper, it doesn't have to be simple. Like I said, it could be gardening, maybe taking guitar lessons. Maybe it is a job change. Maybe it's, going on a trip, visiting somewhere. We've all been cooped up for a while. And, sometimes it's like that moment, right? It's that moment of time when it's like, oh, a whole new world, a whole new discovery. It's when Noah's Ark, they sent out the bird to see if there was still land, dry land, at this moment. Here we are coming out of a pandemic, and, what is the new thing that I would like to do? What was I holding myself back from? So write down just one thing. If you've got two, that's fine, but just write down one thing. What feeling would that give me? What feeling would that give me? Is it joy? And here's the thing. What is the feeling of the accomplishment, what is the feeling of the journey as you proceed in that direction? Right? So if I take for the example of the guitar lessons, that was when I first started doing that. Yeah, it was a struggle, but it felt like fun. Was I expert? By no means. The guitar's sitting, in the other room. I probably haven't touched it in a while, but did I enjoy it? Absolutely. The time with my guitar teacher, exploring around, it made me feel good. And I feel even at the level of accomplishment I'm at right now with it, I feel good about it. What is something that I can do today, right? This moment, next 3 days, this week, to take that initial action step? So whatever first comes to mind, whatever that is. If it's a trip, maybe it's, finding how much does the plane ticket cost? Maybe it's going online and, looking at that place you want to travel to and finding out more information about it. Okay? So just write down, again, what is one thing, how would it make you feel, and what is something I can do today? All right, so we want to see if we could get a couple people that might be able to share what little bit of inspiration came up. I can call on somebody who I can voluntold, or if you can volunteer or voluntold, who would like to go first?
I'll be brave.
All right, thank you, Anne.
And so we're sharing the results of those 3 questions.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I would like to lose weight and get fit and healthy for a trip that's coming in January.
Nice.
Yeah. So the feelings that would give me would be peace. I feel empowered. I have pride in myself. I feel joyful. And throughout doing it, I would not have any regrets or nagging guilt as I followed
Nice.
through. And the one thing that I could do today would be to make my plan and go work out today.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my things. I love exercise. I love working out. And I kind of align with the same thing. It's just I get off the bandwagon and I got to get back on. So your little goal there is kind of similar to what I need to do too. So thank you for being the first one and sharing. Who would like to go next?
Before I share mine, I wanted to kind of jump off something, and that's that I learned from you in one of the Wednesday talks, and that is when working out is kind of, I'm always in a fight with or a challenge with my body and communicating that I feel better when I do something with it and worse than I don't, and often choose the wrong door. So, but you had some of the when you say kind affirmations, that was really important to me to kind of, instead of saying, well, my back hurts today, so it's going to be hard to walk. Instead, I would say, like you were saying, I'm whole, or I'm complete, or if I was feeling like I couldn't do it because I had a project, say I have enough and I'm a priority. So I think to fuel some of that workout is also to just really look at how to take the negative mindset I had and to come up with some positive affirmations that were less, do this because you're a slug, if you'll feel like a slug if you don't, but to flip that on its oversized ass and to say something more kind.
Nice. I agree. Absolutely. Just being kind to ourselves in words, that in itself is a shift. Nice. Did you want to share anything about what you wrote down too? Or was that it?
For me, no, I had a really, I forgot that before the pandemic, I forgot that my boss said to me, Aim, let's do some video work together. Let's do things where you do training and this and that. I blocked that out in a series of survivals. And when you were talking, I started to realize, God, I let that whole light go out. And that I did one where they sent the videographer here and played around a bit. And I thought, God, I I'm feeling not as relevant because the company I work for is out of Dallas, and here I am, so far away. And I thought, God, that is such a beautiful reminder that I could reignite that from a work point of view, but also just what's my voice in a bigger picture, rather than just talk on the furniture industry, which I was kind of, now that I'm near the end of my career, I kind of wonder why that was what my lifetime achievement was giving a place for people to sit, which wasn't really the highest, realm I could have worked on. So now, just what would I do now if the doors were open and I thought about something other than where people sit?
Oh, nice.
So yes, definitely the seeds of Unstuck I felt from your talk. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think too, as you share, right, where people sit metaphorically is you can help them sit at a higher level.
Oh, that's a brilliant. Writing it down, Ron. Writing it down.
And and all of us, that's what we need to do. All of us, that's what we need to do in life, right? It's that
Change your
realization.
perspective from where you sit, right? That's so brilliant.
Yeah. And the talents that you learned with video and stuff like that. It's, everybody, the world needs more messages.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I love that.
I did Toastmasters for a reason, because not to make myself better, but to try to bring this out, the story within everybody, to bring that out in everybody. And I probably shared at the center before, I have a good friend that, he does what I do. And I ran into him, I'm like, boy, basically he does everything about being empowered, being on purpose, and he gets more into the nutrition. He makes smoothies, he's on his videos doing all these, and it's, really inspiring. And then I said, well, what's your story? Because behind your story, right, the second question I think was like, what was your challenge? Well, he had stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He worked in a hospital. This was his second round with cancer. Had gone through the chemo, gone through the radiation, gone through everything. Nothing was working. And he's like, there's got to be a better way. And so he became seeking all different types of natural medicinals and mind-body connection. And it just changed his world. And he said, I'm not going to live within the way I had already gone through. I'm going to do it differently. And I'm going to be an observer, because I'm going to be my own guinea pig along this path, right? And as I learn what I learn, and he started meeting other people, and he started interviewing authors of books, and it just changed his world. Keep in mind, he worked in a hospital. So he had to, and he had his family around him to say, what are you, crazy? Go back and do the, everything you did, the chemo and everything. And he had to break through that world. And now he's a messenger. And I think sometimes, again, it's whatever that thing that's in us, there's clues. Life leads clues. And it's part of connecting that in a positive way that we can bring forth. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you for
I have a comment on that, but I'll let somebody else take the lead, because I could blither on for a while. So please, somebody else.
Well, thank you, Amy. Who else would like to jump in there? I see some magic slippers. Ruby red magic slippers. Not to put any pressure on you, but I just absolutely love the photo. Yeah. I think we lost your audio. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think we did. Is everybody else experiencing your screen froze?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Now you're unfrozen. Okay, that's fine. We can always follow up online afterwards. But anybody else want to share? Did anybody find this difficult? Okay, go ahead, Nicole.
I wrote down to better balance my goals of downsizing and allowing myself to have time for me.
Nice. Isn't it? amazing that sometimes we need to be able to be mindful of our own time? And many of us, when we come in this, this level of consciousness, and we're service, to others, and sometimes we overdo with too many things. We put them on our own plate, and we're trying to help people. In many cases, sometimes we get to that point where I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I need to have time for me. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm sure that's common with a lot of people. It's like people would say, well, wait a second, the time should be standing still. We had a pandemic. People are sitting at home. You don't have to fly. You don't have to drive. My whole world, I don't fly, right? I'll be flying again, but it's like, but I still feel as if there's just so many things, and sometimes never getting it all done and not taking that time for me. So Nicole, I'm glad you shared that, because that's a very important thing. Very important thing. So as we're coming near the end of this, the last thing, which I really feel is one of the basics of all of this, is you don't have, it's the old saying, you don't have to get it perfect. Everything, if you surrender to the greater good, and the best way I find with me, surrender typically is the state of gratitude. Being grateful for what I have in my life, being grateful for life in general, being grateful for this moment, being able to have this conversation with my dear friends, from the Center for Spiritual Living, people I know and people I'm meeting for the first time. So gratitude in itself allows us to be in a state of receptivity. Too many times we are just in that state of anticipation, over expectation, or where is it, right? It's like we're sitting, in the restaurant, and the waiter or waitress comes up to us and takes our order, and we declare our order, and they're heading back to the kitchen, and before they even get to the kitchen, we're like, hey, where is it? It's not there yet. And why? I didn't get it. Somebody else got it, not me. So it's that relaxing and knowing that it's all good. It's all good. Everything is always happening for me and for my greater good and through me and as my life. And as we waken and realize that which is the divine source of all things is the light that shines within us. And we can be that beacon of light, and we can walk in that pattern of knowing that and get to that level. The more that we raise our vibration, the more we shift the entire vibration of humanity. We are vibrational beings in a vibrational universe. And we can't get it wrong. We can't get it wrong. It's part of just knowing and trusting and understanding. It's that, quote from Nikola Tesla that, everything is energy. Everything is, quantum physics tells us that. Everything is connected, everything is energy. And if I realize that which creates heaven and earth, right, creates me, creates as me and as my life, then I cannot walk in fear anymore. Fear cannot be in that place. If I'm in a state of gratitude, fear cannot be in that place. If I start to practice the things that I feel that are true to myself, my well-being, if I step into my greatness, the greater I step into my greatness, then I'm sharing that with the world, Then I'm a fully conscious being and I'm helping other people. Even with Fani, when she sings, gets that on stage, what happens? What happens when she sings on stage? People love the music. She's making people happy. They're dancing to songs that they haven't danced to in ages. The little girl that's sitting in a table, that came a couple nights ago, that saw her and started getting out there and dancing and was holding a microphone. And I said, you just inspired, maybe the future Fani. I said, I don't know, but by you being you And that's the thing. By us being us, that is not only helping us, but it's inspiring others. You know, write that book, paint that painting, take that journey to the place that you have always wanted to go. Speak your truth and say, I need time for me, like Nicole shared. I need to just step back and need time for me. And Nicole, I echo that. I know where you are in your practitioner journey, and having been through all that, and sometimes it's like, I just need to take a break. But we need to honor that, which is so important. So I hope you found this time valuable. I know I could go on, and I kind of just skimmed the surface of some things, but I really appreciate you being here. Is there anybody that has any particular questions? Does this resonate with everybody? Was it fun? That's the most important thing. Was it fun? Good. Good. Well, I want to invite all of you. Of course, some of you are longtime goers to the Center for Spiritual Living. Of course, we've got our online on both Facebook and YouTube, and you can also go to the website cslsarasota.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, so if you want to stay in touch with us, those are really the best outlets. And tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time, on YouTube or on Facebook, or just go to our website and find the links. Kathleen Franker is going to be giving a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and it's on the subject of I think I wrote it down here. Talking to God, Part 3. We've had the series Talking to God, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Jim Grove gave the one last week. And her topic is, what's the big idea? What's the big idea? I love that. It's a catchy title. So hopefully you can all show up and be there. It's something that obviously I do look forward to myself. And if you haven't been to our center, online, that's where we are. Please check us out.